Imagine discovering that something as simple as what you do with your body before sleep could quietly influence your confidence, your vitality, and the way you show up in intimacy the next day, not through magic or hype, but through small nightly habits that your body actually responds to in deep biological ways. Now, before you dismiss this as another internet trick, stay with this, because what I'm about to share isn't about quick fixes or exaggerated promises. It's about understanding how men unknowingly overlook one of the most powerful recovery windows of their entire day, the night. There's a growing awareness that performance in intimacy is not just about what happens in the moment, but about what happens in the hours leading up to it, especially during sleep. Many men assume their energy, desire, and confidence are random or age-dependent, but in reality, the body is constantly rebuilding itself, recalibrating hormones, repairing circulation pathways, and resetting the nervous system every single night. And one overlooked ritual that has been quietly gaining attention among wellness-focused men is the idea of a nighttime oil routine, not as a mystical practice, but as a structured self-care method that signals the body to shift into restoration mode. To understand why this matters, you first have to understand what drains performance in the first place. It's rarely one single thing. It's the accumulation of stress that sits in the body after long hours of responsibility, the tightness in the muscles from sitting too long, the mental fatigue that keeps the nervous system slightly activated even when you're lying in bed. Over time, this creates a disconnect between desire and energy, between intention and physical readiness. And this is where nighttime recovery practices become more than self-care. They become a reset mechanism. The oil routine itself is not about the oil alone. It is about the ritual. Warm oil, when gently applied to the body, especially areas that hold tension like the chest, shoulders, lower back, and even legs, creates a sensory signal to the nervous system that tells it to slow down. This is not just tradition, it's physiology. Touch combined with warmth activates parasympathetic responses, which are responsible for rest, repair, and hormonal balance. When the body feels safe and relaxed, it naturally shifts away from stress dominance and begins to restore the internal systems that support energy and performance. Many men underestimate how much tension they carry without realizing it. You might feel fine during the day, but your body remembers everything. The pressure of deadlines, emotional restraint, lack of movement, even suppressed feelings all get stored physically. By the time night arrives, the body is not always fully ready to rest, even if the mind is exhausted. This mismatch is where the real issue begins, because true vitality is not just about sleep duration. It's about sleep quality and how deeply the body can enter restoration cycles. The nighttime oil routine works because it creates a transition. It marks a boundary between the chaos of the day and the stillness required for recovery. When done consistently, it becomes a signal the body recognizes. Just like brushing your teeth signals hygiene, or dimming lights signals sleep, this practice signals repair. And over time, the nervous system starts to respond faster, relaxing more efficiently, releasing tension more deeply, and allowing hormonal systems tied to energy and intimacy to stabilize. There is also a psychological layer that often goes unnoticed. Men are rarely encouraged to slow down in a tactile, intentional way. Most self-care advice is either fitness-based or productivity-based. But touch, especially self-applied, intentional touch, reconnects a man to his body in a way that modern life often disrupts. This reconnection matters because confidence in intimacy is not only physical, it is deeply rooted in how comfortable you are in your own skin when no one is watching. The nighttime oil routine becomes a private moment where that reconnection is rebuilt, quietly, without pressure or expectation. Another important aspect is circulation. Gentle massage with oil improves blood flow to the surface tissues and helps reduce stiffness that builds up during the day. Better circulation is not just about comfort, it is about function. The body relies on efficient blood flow for energy distribution, muscle responsiveness, and overall physical readiness. When circulation is consistently improved over time, men often report feeling lighter in the body, more awake in the morning, and more naturally energized throughout the day. But perhaps the most overlooked benefit is consistency. Not intensity, not perfection, just consistency. The body responds more strongly to repeated signals than to occasional effort. A nightly routine, even a short one, teaches the body a rhythm. And rhythm is what the human system thrives on. When the body knows what to expect, it adapts more efficiently. This is why small nightly habits often create larger long-term changes than intense but irregular efforts. Now, at this point, it's important to be clear. This is not about replacing medical advice or promising instant transformation. It is about understanding how subtle, repeated care of your body can influence the systems that support confidence, stamina, and emotional presence in intimacy. Many men search for external solutions while overlooking internal regulation. But the truth is, performance is often a reflection of how regulated your nervous system is, not how pushed your body is. And this is where we begin to step into the deeper layer of this topic, because once the body starts responding to nightly restoration, something interesting happens internally. The connection between mind and body starts to strengthen again. You begin to notice subtle shifts in mood and presence, in how you carry yourself, even in everyday interactions. There is a calm confidence that develops not from effort, but from balance. As this nightly oil routine becomes more than just a physical practice, and starts settling into your system as a familiar rhythm, something subtle but powerful begins to shift in the way your body carries itself through the day. It is not an overnight transformation, and it is not dramatic in the way most people expect change to feel, but it shows up in the quiet details. The way your shoulders sit a little lower without effort. The way your breathing feels less restricted when you are under pressure. The way your mind doesn't feel as tightly wound when the day stretches longer than expected. These are not random improvements. They are signs that your nervous system is gradually learning how to exit survival mode more efficiently. One of the most overlooked aspects of male performance in intimacy is nervous system flexibility. When a man is constantly operating in stress response during the day, the body becomes efficient at tension but not at relaxation. This imbalance doesn't just affect sleep or mood, it directly affects presence, responsiveness, and emotional connection in intimate moments. The nighttime oil routine, when done consistently, acts like a reset cue. It teaches the body how to transition. And this ability to transition smoothly is one of the most underrated foundations of confidence in intimate relationships. There is also a deeper emotional layer that begins to emerge. Many men carry emotional residue from daily life without realizing it. Unspoken frustration, suppressed fatigue, silent pressure to perform in multiple roles. Over time, this creates a kind of emotional stiffness that mirrors physical stiffness. When you begin engaging in a nightly ritual that involves slow, intentional contact with your own body, something interesting happens. You begin to feel again, not in an overwhelming way, but in a grounded way. You become more aware of your own internal state without avoiding it. And this awareness is what allows emotional presence to return in intimate settings. Intimacy is not just physical performance. It is the ability to stay present with another person without disconnecting from yourself. Many men struggle not because of lack of desire, but because of internal noise. The mind is too active, the body is too tense, or the emotional state is too fragmented to fully engage. When the body begins to relax consistently at night, that fragmentation slowly reduces. You begin to notice that you are less distracted in moments that require closeness. You are more attuned to subtle cues, more patient with connection, more grounded in interaction. Another important shift happens in perception of self. A man who takes time to care for his body at night begins to develop a different relationship with himself. It is no longer purely functional, where the body is only used to get through tasks and responsibilities. Instead, it becomes something you actively maintain, something you are aware of beyond performance. This shift often leads to increased self-respect, not in an abstract motivational sense, but in a practical embodied sense. You start treating your energy as something valuable, rather than something endlessly extractable. And when self-perception changes, behavior naturally follows. Men often report that they begin to carry themselves differently without consciously trying. They become more deliberate in speech, more relaxed in posture, and more stable in emotional reactions. These changes are not forced, they are byproducts of a regulated system. A body that is not constantly in tension does not require constant overcompensation in behavior. There is also a hormonal rhythm that benefits indirectly from consistent nighttime recovery practices. While no single routine can override lifestyle factors, the body is highly responsive to repeated relaxation cues. Deep sleep quality improves when the nervous system is not carrying excessive activation into the night. And deeper sleep is where the body performs its most important restoration processes. Energy balance, tissue repair, and hormonal regulation are all tied to sleep depth. When this improves, men often notice more natural energy in the morning and a more stable sense of drive throughout the day. Not the jittery kind of energy, but the steady kind that supports confidence in intimate situations. It is also worth noting that touch itself plays a psychological role that is often ignored in male wellness discussions. When touch is slow, intentional, and self-directed, it becomes grounding. It creates a feedback loop between the brain and body that reinforces calm awareness. Over time, this can reduce the disconnect many men experience between mental awareness and physical sensation. That disconnect is one of the hidden barriers to full presence in intimacy, where the mind may be engaged, but the body feels slightly detached or delayed. Rebuilding that connection through nightly practice can gradually reduce that gap. However, the key here is not intensity, but repetition. Many men assume that stronger effort creates stronger results, but the nervous system does not respond to force in the same way it responds to consistency. A gentle routine practiced regularly becomes more powerful than an intense routine done occasionally. The body learns through patterns, not pressure. As this pattern continues over weeks, something more subtle begins to emerge in intimate dynamics as well. There is less performance anxiety, not because pressure disappears completely, but because internal regulation improves. When the body is more familiar with relaxation, it does not interpret closeness or anticipation as stress. Instead, it can remain more stable under emotional or physical intensity. This stability is often perceived as confidence by others, even when nothing outwardly obvious has changed. And this is where the practice starts to go beyond wellness and into identity. A man who is regulated, present, and physically at ease begins to experience intimacy differently. It is less about proving something and more about experiencing connection without internal resistance. That shift changes everything about how intimacy feels, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically as well. And at this point, we are ready to go deeper into how these subtle internal changes begin to reshape long-term confidence, attraction dynamics, and the way older men in particular carry what is often described as quiet masculine energy, which is not loud or forced, but steady and grounded in presence. As this practice continues to settle into a man's routine, something even more profound begins to unfold. Something that cannot be measured in a single night or even a single week, but only noticed in hindsight when life starts to feel different in its texture. The urgency that once used to sit in the body begins to soften. The need to constantly prove, to constantly perform, to constantly push through fatigue without listening to it, slowly loses its grip. In its place, there is a steadier kind of presence, one that does not depend on external validation or momentary stimulation, but instead comes from a regulated internal state that has learned how to stay calm even in intensity. This is where the idea of quiet masculine energy becomes relevant, especially for older men who have lived through enough of life to recognize that force alone does not create attraction, but presence does. Quiet attractiveness is not about being passive or invisible. It is about being so internally steady that your energy does not fluctuate wildly depending on circumstance. When a man is internally regulated, his presence becomes felt even in silence. In intimate relationships, this kind of energy creates a sense of safety, depth, and emotional grounding that is often more powerful than overt expression. The nighttime oil routine, when viewed through this lens, is not just a physical ritual anymore. It becomes a symbolic act of returning to yourself. Every evening, it is a reminder that your body is not something to be ignored until it breaks down, but something to be maintained, respected, and listened to. Over time, this simple repetition reshapes identity. You stop relating to your body as something separate from your mental state and start seeing it as part of a unified system that requires care in order to function at its best. One of the most important shifts that happens in this stage is the way desire itself is experienced. Many men think of desire as something that either appears or disappears randomly. But in reality, desire is deeply connected to nervous system tone. When the body is constantly in stress mode, desire becomes inconsistent or mentally fragmented. When the body is consistently in recovery mode, desire becomes more natural, more stable, and less dependent on external stimulation. It begins to feel less like a chase and more like a natural flow of energy that exists within you rather than something you have to search for. This stability changes the dynamics of intimacy in a very subtle but powerful way. There is less pressure to perform and more capacity to simply be present. And presence, in intimate relationships, is often what creates the deepest sense of connection. When a man is fully present in his body, not rushing, not escaping into his thoughts, not disconnected from sensation, intimacy becomes more emotionally rich and more physically aligned. It is no longer about achieving a result, but about experiencing connection as it unfolds. At this stage, many men also begin to notice that their confidence in everyday life becomes less dependent on external outcomes. Because when you are consistently engaging in a practice that reinforces self-regulation, your nervous system starts to trust itself more. That trust shows up as calm decision-making, reduced reactivity, and a stronger sense of groundedness in conversations and relationships. You stop overcompensating for insecurity because the internal tension that used to drive that behavior is no longer as dominant. There is also a subtle shift in attraction dynamics. Quiet masculine energy is often experienced by others as depth, not because of what is said, but because of what is not needed to be said. When a man is not constantly seeking validation or filling silence with nervous energy, his presence becomes more impactful. This is not about manipulation or strategy. It is about coherence. When your internal state is aligned, your external expression becomes naturally more stable and grounded, and that stability is often perceived as strength. What makes this especially relevant for older men is that it removes the pressure of trying to compete with younger energy or external expectations of masculinity. Instead, it emphasizes refinement over intensity. The focus shifts from doing more to being more present in what you already are. This is where maturity becomes an advantage rather than a limitation. Experience, when combined with internal regulation, creates a kind of quiet authority that does not need to be announced. And at the center of all of this remains the simplicity of the nightly ritual. Warm oil, intentional touch, a few minutes of slowing down before sleep. Something so simple that it can be overlooked, yet so consistent in its effect that it gradually reshapes how the entire system operates. It is not about perfection, and it is not about strict discipline. It is about repetition that signals safety to the body, and safety is what allows real restoration to happen. Over time, this restoration affects everything: energy in the morning, emotional stability during the day, responsiveness in intimate moments, and the overall sense of being connected to yourself, rather than fragmented from yourself. The changes are not loud, but they are lasting. And because they are built through repetition, rather than intensity, they tend to sustain themselves in a way that quick fixes never do. In the end, what this routine truly offers is not just improved performance in intimacy, but a return to a more grounded version of masculinity. One that is not defined by pressure or performance, but by presence, regulation, and quiet confidence that does not need to be proven. It is the kind of energy that does not demand attention, but naturally holds it. And when all three layers of this understanding come together, the physical, the emotional, and the psychological, what emerges is not just a routine, but a way of living that supports long-term vitality, deeper connection, and a more stable sense of self in both intimacy and life itself.